Hi and welcome. Welcome to another episode of Creating Resilience. This is for you and you and you and you. We are now doing roundtables, which means that you are very important to us because you bring us the topics. And please be aware you can also be a guest on the webinar. If you would desire to, just contact one of us and let us know. And you just have to obey to the rules and the regulations, and then you will be one of our guests. So please know that you're very welcome. Your voice needs to be heard. So our topics today are the politics slash three pillars of sustainability. I have five pillars. Intersectionality, redefining veganism, and what are the pitfalls of overemphasizing? This is from Vanessa, and the other one from Vanessa. Does the golden rule have it wrong? I totally agree with her and what she put afterwards. So we'll start with Vanessa. Would you like to start off, Vanessa? And audience, please join in. We want to hear your voice.
Yes, we sure do. This is Vanessa Marceau, CEO and founder of Alora Vegan Organic Wellness Center, a one-stop shop for cruelty-free, sustainable living. We're all wearing hats in honor of Paige because she's always sporting them. So we decided Dorit had this inspiration for us to join in. And I'm going to be monitoring questions and feedback from the audience. So please leave us messages and also share this out, start watch parties, do some groups. We have some great topics that I and Dorit and Jonathan and Jillian and all kinds of our viewers and guests have proposed. And today, my favorite topic out of all of them, redefining veganism, but also, does the golden rule have it wrong? Because to me, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you doesn't go far enough. It's about what you want and what you like. It's not about true empathy of how the other person wants to be treated, which may be very different. So we're going to get into all these wonderful topics in just a few minutes.
So who wants to go first? Just unmic yourself and go for it. Go for it, Paige and Jonathan. Who wants to go first?
Yeah. I'll go first. I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge everyone who's here watching. So appreciate you tuning in because there's a lot that could take your time right now, a lot of content. I also want to acknowledge Dorit and Vanessa for creating this powerful conversation on a regular basis. So, and you too, Jonathan, while we're at it, because the fake movement is really opening people's eyes to the cruelty that we don't even realize when you're putting on a leather belt or when you're putting on, a fur coat, or just like those little things like you're carrying that rabbit fur, little pom-pom thing accessory, and you don't even realize that an animal had to suffer for that product, and it's so unnecessary. So when you bring up that topic, Vanessa, about do unto others as you would want to be done unto you, I actually want to say at this day and age, at this time of where we are, I do not want people to treat me the way that they're treating themselves and others, because it's outrageous what's happening. And we've forgotten empathy. We have forgotten compassion for ourselves and others. It is outrageous. And listen, I don't like to stay in that neighborhood too long. Like, I don't go and watch mainstream news very often, like hardly ever. My husband keeps me abreast of what's happening on mainstream. I seek out the information by which I want to absorb, because everything is being absorbed and so much is coming at us. So just circling back to, yes, I'm going to treat myself the best way possible. And that is what my expectation is of others. So they may not be able to live up to that, given their pain, given what they're dealing with, what their fears are. So much of what we're dealing with now is fear. People even changing over to a vegan, compassion-free, compassion-filled, cruelty-free, lifestyle is. A lot of people come from a fear-based mentality making those changes. So I I got to say, do unto yourself as you'd like others to do unto you is the way I say it, and exude that compassion and empathy forward. We need that. We need us all to rise up and be that for one another, be that for ourselves first and for others.
Thank you there, Paige. And thanks for inspiring us all to wear hats. I'm still blown away by Vanessa's hat. And I preferred you in your little cap there, Jonathan.
Oh,
yes.
This is I don't know. I don't feel very comfortable with this.
No, if you don't, then don't do it. Then why do you own it?
So yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I never thought about this. To me, the golden rule sounds really good. Like don't do to other what you would not want to do to yourself. But it's true that now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, yeah, it's true for some people. They do things to themselves that I wish they would not do it on me. So it's true. You need to first probably focus on yourself, your welfare, and then you can do to other what you do to yourself. But make sure what you do to yourself is already something good.
So, Vanessa, anything to add? Please, yes, please do. Put that hat back on.
Yes. Just have the hat off.
In all its glory. Only Vanessa would find a hat like that.
I know, it's garden party time with that hat. Party time in the garden.
It was my first major purchase probably in my life when I was very young, living in Paris, and I had no money. I was acting, modeling, being broke, and I was getting married, and I went to Lolita Lempica, who was my favorite designer at the time, and I saw this hat, and I was like, oh, I need that hat. And it was probably like twice my paycheck teaching English, but I got it anyway. So yeah, I would say, like, especially from relationships and the way, for example, the way that I am in my home and how I want things to be, I would see how people would act and how careless they were with themselves, their person, what they put in and on their bodies, how they treat things around them. I'm not in a disposable culture. I try to really preserve anything I have. Whatever it is, my health, my mental state, my well-being, my furniture, anything. I don't want to just dispose of things once I'm bored with it or done or, whatever. I want to preserve and treasure everything and be grateful for everything. And I would see how careless people were with themselves and everything around them. And when I would comment, I remember a friend one time saying, well, it wouldn't bother me if you did that at my home, like putting their feet on my table or, just being like leaving crumbs everywhere or being messy. And that's when this was very, very early on, probably when I first started having my own place. And I thought, well, that may work for you. And for you to treat me the way you'd be fine me treating you at home would totally not work for me. If you're like a very messy, slobby person, that's fine. That's your place. You and your cockroaches are welcome to have a party and hang out and do your thing. That's not going to work for me. And that's going to be upsetting to me. So when you come into my space, my rules, when I go into your space, your rules. I'll be happy to make a big mess in your place and drip everywhere. And so I started developing this theory that, as Paige and Jonathan were saying, that a lot of times people don't treat themselves well, and they put crap in their systems, and they put death in their systems, and torture and suffering. That is certainly not how I want to be treated. I don't want to be treated in a way that's any different from my moral framework and my beliefs. And so, like in relationships, it may not bother somebody to not communicate when there's a problem or an issue or conflict. My way is I want to address it and get it out because that's what's healthy for me to be able to discuss any issues. So in so many ways, so many levels, so many forms of ethics, to me, it really is about what are my standards for me. And this is what I'm presenting to you is the way to deal with me. My guidebook, my handbook for what I like, and I'm very happy to oblige you with what you like. And that to me is really empathy. It's what that person needs and wants, which is different from what I want and need.
So unfortunately, Sarah is not with us today. She's having tech problems, tried to join in and has been unable to. So if you watch this, Sarah, we send you our love.
Yes,
And
Sarah.
we trust that your tech issues will be resolved soon, but please know that you are joining a whole list of us who are having tech problems.
Yes, we've all had them.
It just happens to be your turn, that's all. So, I believe that most people, a lot of people, much more than I was aware of, I'm now aware of, have suffered a lot of trauma in their lives and have been abused and have been violently abused.
Yeah.
So so they have no idea what is treating somebody in a decent way because they've never been treated that way.
Yeah.
So if I expect people to treat me as they would like to be treated, I've lowered my standards tremendously. It means that you can abuse me. I am fine with that. I am okay with that, and I sure am not. However, does it then mean that we have to pull these people into our own standards? But because if you've been abused all your life and this is the way you've been treated, for you it's normal. So do we then pull them up to our standards and take them out of their comfort zone? Because this has to do, not because they are into abuse, but because that's their comfort zone. That's what they're familiar with. That's what they're used to. So how do we include them in this conversation? Anyone?
That's a really, really good point. If they're used to being abused, for example, if they're used to somebody treating them roughly or badly, that will not be a harmonious relationship, because I will not agree to treat you in that way. That may be what you want, what you ask for, what is comfortable for you. And I can acknowledge that and hear that, but I can also say, this is my standard. And if it's something I don't feel is healthy, I'm going to distance myself. I'm not going to be able to give you what you need if it is something that I deem healthy. And yes, that's a subject. It's a judgment call, because it's like, well, I'm defining what's healthy or not. I'm defining what's healthy for me, and I can't treat you in a way that's going to violate my boundaries and my standards. I guess what I would say, and I love that we're getting even more precise in terms of psychology, human behavior, and empathy with this whole golden rule question, is I will treat you the way you want to be treated as long as it doesn't violate my standards, my ethics, in order to do so. So I think that's an excellent clarification.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I don't know what to add to that. It's actually a kind of new concept to me. I never really took the time to think about it. And I feel like Vanessa put perfectly the word on this, and I'm more like, I feel like I'm learning here more than I can give advice. I think it's what she says is perfect.
Okay, Paige, how about you? You have children.
So I do have children. I have two grown children, 19 and 21-year-old. This may seem random, but I'm part of a group called Vegans for Black Lives Matter, and I was reading, and someone posted something along the lines of they feel that they're treated better than, or they're treated better than Crips, or they feel like the Crips treat them better than most people. And I was like, oh, I've heard that with Crips. I don't want to assume I know what that is. So I looked it up, and it's actually a gang that was created in Los Angeles. And one of the heads of the gang, Snooki, I'm forgetting the name, two of them. But anyway, the point is that when I read about his story, his parents were part of dog fighting, or his dad, okay? And then after they were finished with the dog fighting, they would then fight the children. The children would fight each other. And I thought, I was so crushed by that, because, when children are young, when we're young, we're so impressionable and we want to do the right thing. And the way in which I'm going to relate this personally is I didn't know until I knew about the meat and egg industry, right? Being vegan. I didn't realize what was happening in the industry of the animals. I was brainwashed into thinking the way in which most of us have been raised, if you're in your age range that we are. So the reason I bring this up is because I just had so much empathy for this child that then became the head of a Crip, what's called the Crips, a huge gang in Los Angeles, and then was killed at such a young age, which is the fate of so many that are in the gangs, that are in the streets, and that I thought his life could have been so different if he had had different circumstances. And I'm not blaming the parents. Don't get me wrong. It goes so far back to the systematic way of like redlining with communities and the lack of opportunity for education, good education, and so forth. And the police brutality, the film 13th, where, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but the film 13th showed me a lot of how things have been set up in our United States of America. And it just made my heart reach out for the compassion of any individual who has raised a particular way, have had abuse. That's what you know. That's what we know. That's what I knew. And it takes shifting consciously, just on a personal note, my mom, lovely, amazing, was of the era that she was more important than her children at the time in a lot of ways. And I looked at it at the time as, man, she's so selfish. And when later, having done some evolution work, I realized she was trying to survive her circumstances with a man that she married that was very demanding of her. And I have a lot of compassion for that. And so I noticed for myself, I really have to bring that forward for my kids because I wasn't raised that way. It may sound completely entitled and privileged or whatever, but I'm just saying that's my life. So I bring that forward as much as I can with my children to teach them that empathy is essential, and it may be something you have to learn.
So, Paige, to go with what you're saying here, so do you think that the circumstances decide whether or not we have empathy or not? Because if somebody is simply in a survival mode, do they even understand what the word empathy then means? Is it possible? Or can they, more than anyone else, understand what the word empathy means?
That's a really interesting quandary that we are living right now. We are living what you are asking, because we're not being led by leaders on the majority who come from a place of empathy, who come from a place of compassion. And therefore, now that's not for everybody, but I'm saying as a majority of people, we are not on the radio stations, in the movies, and on the TV stations. You're not seeing a lot of that. You're seeing a lot of like this joking around sarcasm that's being accepted. And so we don't have a lot of that modeling being brought forth. I do believe you can learn empathy. I don't think that people are broken when they're born. I don't. I believe that, one thing that I've heard the Earthling Ed talk about being in, or maybe it's James Aspie, one of the leaders in veganism and animal rights. If a child is in a crib with a baby bunny and a baby chick, and maybe even the calf is in this bin with it, and some fruit, the child's going to eat the fruit and pet the animal. That's empathy. You have empathy for an animal. So I do believe, but I also can see, and this is where today it was an eye-opener, if you're not being modeled or you don't have an environment by which you're being raised in, it's very hard to move beyond that if you don't have resources and you don't feel that you do. And as children, you rely on the people around you. You are at the mercy of them, but a lot of people do leave their homes at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, a lot younger these days. There's a lot of homeless teens on the streets, a lot. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly. I see Vanessa nodding. Do you want to add to that, Vanessa?
Yes, I do. When I was working in a group home for teens who had just come out of prison, there was a program that we used in evidence-based practice called ART, aggression replacement therapy. And it was all about teaching empathy, because the premise was that a lot of these kids grew up in very disordered homes and they weren't actually taught empathy. Or, of course, we say a lot of times in the therapy world, it's always reminding you of what your internal wisdom already knows. It's not teaching you something new. It's just reminding you of what your inherent wisdom knows, that as a baby or young child, you're going to salivate when you see that apple, not when you see the bunny. You're going to want to play with and pet and touch the bunny. You pretty much nobody salivates when they, humans at least, when they see a bunny rabbit. So in terms of the ART program that we use, we had this one example that always struck with me, because we had a lot of kids who were gang members whose parents were gone, prostitution, drugs, gang stuff. And so they didn't have that teaching. And so there was an example with a car, because a lot of them had committed GTA, Grand Theft Auto. There's an example of a car. If you see a car there, it's just on the side of the road, and you look in and you can see that there are keys in the ignition. What do you do? Every single one of the kids chose, I would take it. Okay, so now let's just say that same car, you take it, and then you look in the back seat and there's the baby. What would you do? So then they started thinking, oh God, I don't know. I'm not sure what I would do. Like, it became a little bit more confusing, but a lot of them said I'd probably still take it, and then, I don't know, maybe leave the baby somewhere or give him to a police station or whatever. They had various answers, but it was still, I'd take the car. Then the next question was, let's say it turns out that baby was the baby of a friend of yours where you knew the mother. Then what would you do? And then most of them were like, oh, well, then I probably wouldn't take it. I wouldn't want to take it if it's somebody I know. And so it went successively through empathy. When you really truly have empathy developed, you have empathy for anyone, any being. As I always say, when the portals of compassion are truly open, you have empathy for all beings. You don't make a choice like just the people I know. My tribe. This is what isms are. My tribe, God save America. These are my people. I'm going to look out for my people. That's not empathy. Empathy is you have compassion for all beings, animals who suffer, indigenous people, anyone in any oppressed group, any orientation, anything, any group of beings. So what the example with the Grand Theft Auto was really trying to teach them was how their empathy kicked in when it was somebody they knew. And they started to see the situation where, okay, so the way you feel about your best friend's mother losing her baby, you're starting to understand how that mother might feel. Now imagine it's some mother you don't know. Now imagine it's a situation where this person needs this car to go to the hospital. We would just start giving them more scenarios so they start thinking about this absent, unknown person whose car it is, and in that way they could develop empathy. So I felt like that program was highly effective at teaching empathy for these kids who don't develop empathy in the normal ways. They have to harden for survival, like Paige was talking about with the Crips. You have circumstances that definitely affect how you're able to take in and process the world. And when you're in a state of survival, or you feel alone and you feel threatened by everything, you're going to have a very different presentation and affect from somebody who's had a more calm, peaceful, less threatening sort of life. So I think that empathy can absolutely be taught for anyone. It's easier with teens because their neural pathways aren't fully formed, and it's much easier. There's more plasticity to be able to create new pathways. But for anyone at any age, it's always possible to model, teach, show empathy at any stage of anyone's life. And it is something that I think we need to model when we have a president and government that doesn't have empathy and that advocates violence, that advocates I'd knock that person out or beat them up for me, or any kind of belligerence, then that's the message that we're sending out, that's the way to protect yourself and to feel safe. And what that tells me is that's a very scared and unsafe, internally speaking person, because that's what they're conveying. Somebody who feels really safe and secure is able to extend and role model that empathy much more easily.
So according to follow up with what you and Kate said, then ought we then to look for empathy as the most important quality in a political leader rather than a personality?
Oh my gosh, 100,000 trillion% yes. I think that leaders who show empathy are much more relatable. They're much more able to handle crises effectively when they've shown that. Now, this is a huge generalization just because I was reading about women leaders and they show, so we have Jacinda from New Zealand. I always forget how to say Ardern. Ardern, thank you. Theresa May, not so much. Angela Merkel, and a few others. There was an African leader they mentioned that they tend to work in collaboration and consultation, and those to me are inherently empathic stances. It's not I'm imposing my viewpoint, this is what we do. It's that let me take in information from others, let me open up and see, let me consult with experts, let me see what the scientists have to say, let me find out other viewpoints, other opinions. And that to me creates a much richer, more diverse perspective from which to judge. It also has much more far-sighted consequences, and it's much more relatable. People, I think, need to look up to you as a leader, but really know and see that you have empathy and you care about their concerns to create a more balanced and well-rounded society, which we certainly don't have in this country right now. So I think that there would be much less divisiveness and much less splitting if we could have leaders with empathy where everyone could feel that their needs and concerns were addressed or at least heard.
Yeah, I think it's all about reconnecting as well, because as you said before, when we are kids, we will choose to eat the apple and to pet the rabbit, and we live in a system that divides us and that made us selfish. I'm thinking a lot of school, for example, where they give you notes, and so they divide by giving some kids more smart than others because they have a better note, And I feel like by living in this system, we start to divide each other and to focus more on ourselves, and it's more difficult to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And yeah, it's all about reconnecting because we already have this value inside of us. It's just finding them again and putting them out.
So what do you think, Jonathan, what do you think stops that from continuing?
What do you mean?
You said
a little bit.
You said we have to find it again. What caused why did we lose it in the first place?
Like I said, I think it's the system would divide us by.
Who created the system? Who created the system? Because the system doesn't exist by itself. Who created the system?
It's the society. It's the way we live. By
who makes up society? Who makes up society?
It's us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would like you and the rest of the panel to say, how could we as a society then make these changes? Because it's not like in the United States that we didn't have the opportunity to elect a leader.
By educating ourselves, by watching documentaries, by reading books, by creating conversation like you do right now. And yeah, I think that's the best way. Education is what will help us to understand what's happening and to open our eyes.
Thank you. That's why I think too that events like this online and the internet is so critically important. However, we will be discussing when Rio is available what's going on the internet, because instead of more compassion there and more empathy, I'm seeing the opposite. And we will also speak about that. How can we use the internet to then do that? So anybody wants to continue on this theme? Yes, please.
I want to first bring in just 2 comments from our viewers. Thank you all for watching. George McQuaid says that just like we don't salivate when an animal runs in front of our vehicles, we're all naturally cautious not to harm others. And he was saying that Gwenna Hunter, who's another of our panelists, who's just not on today, and we're all housemates, Gwenna, George, and I. Gwenna and I were just talking last night about people in gangs, what they're truly seeking. And I think that's a really good point, because I know from from my work with gang members and, from a therapeutic perspective, that a lot of them are looking for family. They're looking for community. They're sort of left alone without their parents around. So a lot of times they're looking for that connectedness and that feeling of safety. And then he says, not putting people in prison without offering tools to work through self-improvement. They end with a lifelong unreasonable adversity. Changing how we treat others on large scale, acceptable norms, they must be challenged for sure. Prisons are often not places where people learn new skills or get rehabilitated. I know when I was in prison I was in jail, not prison. I was in prison for 25 years. So for protesting outside a duck slaughterhouse, and I talked to a lot of the people who were in there, and I was asking them, always the therapist, asking them, what are you in for, and what tools have you had, because most of them were repeat. They had high recidivism. So I said, what kind of tools have you been given? Because most of them were drug stuff, prostitution, just kind of survival things. This is what they were doing to try to make a living in this difficult world. And I said, have you worked on this? Have you worked on these? No tools. And I said, is that something that you would value if you really were able to work through some of your trauma and ways in which you go back to your old coping mechanisms? And they're like, yes, we've been asking for that. And that's what they've been begging for and that they don't receive. So I think that's so important, and that education, treatment, therapy, conversation, and of course the Creating Resilience webinar are also important in terms of educating us, because we are the ones who have created these dysfunctional structures. I think my sort of theory on the origin of that is really that we started on this planet not knowing why we're here, what purpose we have, what's the meaning, what's my purpose, and how do I matter? And that from those questions and not having any answers, we develop stories, whether it be of a father figure in the sky, your king, the royalty, governments, whatever it is. We wanted some figure that we put above us to guide us, to tell us what to do, because that existential question of answering my purpose and my meaning in life is so big and so scary that I think we decided to take our responsibility for that and are facing that unknowingness and that act of self-creation. And instead, we invested that power in our leaders, whatever kind of leader you want to say, to tell us who we are, what our place in society is, what our value is. And we've been doing that since the beginning of recorded time, where we've had these leaders and hierarchies, and that we've had situations, even when they've been very dysfunctional, that we have continued to put up with, because at least we knew our place and we knew where we were. And that wars were very easy to manipulate us into, because if we say these are bad and they're threatening your way of life, they're taking away your freedom, they're taking your resources, whatever it is, oh, I'm being threatened and I'm being told that what I have is going to be taken away. So of course I'm going to want to engage in warfare against this group that is threatening that. So I think that we're going to continue to have strife, division, and warfare until we start seeing that we don't need these father figures and authority figures that are telling us what to do and telling us how we matter. And I want to just quick aside, consumerism is part of that, because consumerism is also defining you. You're not pretty enough, smart enough, strong enough, thin, tall, fat, smart, whatever enough, unless you buy this product. So these are all ways that we have created and bought into to tell us who we are, define us, and what our place is in this world.
So this is bringing us into the other two topics of intersectionality. We've just shown how that works, and the politics / 3 pillars of sustainability. So which one would you all like to address first?
Intersectionality.
Okay,
right away, I think.
Paige, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said, Vanessa.
Oh, just that intersectionality seemed to flow very fluidly from this topic, I thought.
Mm.
Yes. In doing my research leading up to this, I found this incredible brochure What is an engaged environmentalism? What is engaged environmentalism? By Dr. Sailash Rao, Climate Healers. Just circling to the, would you ever deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? I think that's where empathy just kicks right in. And we would say, no, we would never do that. Anybody would say that. And then I believe we could switch out animal and say human being. Human being. And that's intersectionality right there. Would you ever deliberately hurt an innocent person unnecessarily?
Mm.
Food for thought right there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, even say a being. That's what I believe veganism is about. From my understanding on veganism, it's the animal. And when we talk the animal when we talk about the animal, we talk about the non-human animal, but as well the human animal. So we're all animals. So I believe that when you're vegan, to me, the concept of being vegan is intersectional, because we're all animal and we should care of all type of social justice and animal rights, and everything is connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my big issues with a lot of vegan sites and places and comments is that they seem to think that, first of all, vegans are superior. And secondly, that they seem to, a lot of vegans, in fact, just today I read somebody commenting on this, that they prefer animals to humans. And they seem to take great joy in that and great pride in that. But that is self-hatred to me.
Mm.
How can you prefer an animal? One, that's speciesism also. It's the same thing as preferring one animal to another. It's the same thing as saying, oh my God, I would never eat a dog. How can these people eat dogs? Oh, we've got to really get after them and then sit down afterwards and have a hamburger or a steak.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing to say, oh, I prefer animals to human beings, but we are animals. It's pretending that we're not who we are. So based on that, everything seems to go back to this thing of empathy. If you can have empathy for yourself, then you can have empathy for all beings. And you're not just going to choose which ones to have empathy for and which ones not to, because empathy is inclusive, it's not exclusive. Can we discuss this, please?
Mm-hmm.
Before we bring that point up, I just want to, if I may, I looked up what is intersectionality and when was it created, because I think it's become a mainstream part of the vernacular, but I wanted to point out intersectionality was coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw, a civil rights activist and legal scholar. In a paper for the University of Chicago Legal Forum, Crenshaw wrote that traditional feminist ideas and anti-racist policies exclude Black women because they face overlapping discrimination unique to them. So I just wanted to bring that. This was actually written on October 23rd, 2018. I just wanted to bring that into the space. I think that's fascinating. I've heard, various just conversations about how it's being used, intersectionality. I do believe it has been brought into the vegan space by various people, but I know I've been hearing it from leaders in the vegan space that are Black, African Americans, Black, people of color, brown, that bring that about. And I think that's what I've been deferring is whenever I'm hearing someone who is a BIPOC, that for me then, not that I have allowance, but I will repost that information coming from a person of color. Does that make sense?
Hmm?
Yeah, I think that the ways in which we treat different sets of beings is so culturally inscribed, because really culture, race, these are all arbitrary constructs. And so I think they're all just ways for us to, again, try to define ourselves, that I am not that. And I have a superior caste, as Isabel Wilkerson talks about it. She talks about how we created a caste that actually the Nazis came to America to study how we differentiate between black, not and white. And they use that in forming their positions of determinations. And actually their determinations were less strict than the American versions in terms of excluding people who had Jewish blood or not at that time. So I think that is really important to keep an eye on. The other thing that I was going to say is that, well, first I'm going to read a few comments. We have George McQuaid saying, not allowing the government to subsidize torture, harming our health and environment. Obviously not allowing the insider creation of wealth and separation by those in political roles. The lack of ethics and accountability / character and values inhibits an empathic population. I actually want to bring up two quotes about that, or two thoughts from people. I'm reading A Darwin Affair right now, which is a murder mystery set at the time of Charles Darwin publishing On the Origin of Species, and how much furor that created. How dare he suggest that we might have apes as an ancestor? Like, these are dumb animals. We don't have any similarity. And I happen to think that if Darwin were alive right now, he'd for sure be a vegan. But one of his followers, Thomas Huxley, who was having, there was this big debate about Darwin's work with Bishop Wilberforce. And the bishop was making fun of him, saying, so tell me, was it on your grandmother or your grandfather's side that you're related to an ape? And Thomas Huxley said, if the choice is between being related to somebody who uses his great talents to bring ridicule to a debate versus having an ape as a grandparent, I'd choose the ape. And I just think that that approach to me is so wonderful in kind of dropping the barriers between us and other beings that we all think and feel. And even back then, they knew that in an ape's brain, it has the same makeup as a human brain. They looked at the different segments and they were able to see that there isn't this huge difference. And we think that we have reason and logic and even empathy. But we have proof that animals have that as well, and they have very similar brain structures. And that when we say, I don't like people, or like Charles de Gaulle would say, the more people I know, the more I like my dog, I think that speaks to the woundedness that we have inside. That, again, I'm going to quote Mr. Rogers now, that when he'd see these terrible, distressing things on TV, his mother would always say, look for the helpers. That there is great pain and great misery. And yes, humans do these unspeakable things to each other, but they come from places of woundedness. And if we focus on that, we know that they need healing rather than our hatred, and that there are always people with empathy who are coming in and wanting to bring light to that. And in that way, I wanted to address that George McQuaid is saying he struggles with that as humans manipulate and harm without any true need. Non-humans in general don't really act in that manner that we know of. We don't know what kind of structures. We don't know if cats hold grudges and they're like, listen, you stole my girl, so I'm going to make sure to, beat you up or so. I mean, we don't know. We do know that there are certain primates that have very vicious wars against each other that are based on territory and property rights and domination. We know that certain cats, like panthers, will kill for fun, not just because they need to eat. So I think that all beings have complexities that we may not be aware of, not speaking their languages and not knowing always the reasons for their behavior. So to say one group is better than another, I think a lot of times it's easy to say animals are so pure and innocent and wonderful. And I think in a lot of ways they are, but it's also we don't understand them. We don't know what they're saying. When my cat would look at me so beautifully and innocently meowing, and I was like, oh my God, she's an angel. She's just full of love and whatever. How do I know she's not really saying, I'm going to now manipulate this stupid cat lady and I'm going to get her to do exactly what I want because I know how to be cute and appeal to her and be this like baby-like way to get her instincts going to want to take care of me and protect me. We don't really know. And I think to value one over the other points out that we're not looking at that woundedness, as I'm saying, and also the fact that animals speak a different language from us, so we don't know what their motivations are, if they're a little bit more sophisticated than we necessarily think.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And to answer what Dorit was saying about animal rights activists that feel superior and that don't really want to take part of social justice and just talk about non-humans animal, I'm not defending them. It's just I'm trying to understand them the same way. When someone is not vegan, I will not tell him, oh, you're not vegan, you're a bad person. I will try to understand and to have a better approach to them. And I believe that is because they feel like what's happening to animal is actually the roots of everything else. That when you teach to a kid to be nice to a cat, but you can eat and beat a chicken or a pig, you teach them difference and speciesism. And I believe that is the roots of racism and discrimination and everything that's happening in the world. So maybe that's why they want to focus more on this. But yeah, we need to find a way to educate them and explaining them that is actually everything is connected, and if you are nice to a non-human animal, you should be nice to human animal as well, because they are animals and everything is connected.
Okay, so I have another question for you all, which I'm going to be asking every single person who comes on every one of these panels, and also when anybody who comes to this as a viewer or as a participant, because the viewers are also participants, to this roundtable, I'd like you all to ask yourself this question: what is, not what are, but what is your core value? One, the core value, because everything else is based on that. And after you say that, is this developed during our childhood? Does it depend on our childhood experiences or societal, or is this something you brought with you to Earth? Because I think this affects everything. So who wants to go first?
I need to think.
I guess. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, actually, I was saying I need to think a little bit.
I can answer the core value because I have thought about that. And I just want to make an aside, which is I think that Dorit always has beautifully profound, insightful, and incisive thoughts, comments, questions that really are very stimulating to the mental juices. So I just really want to acknowledge Dorit for that, because it's always a thought-provoking discussion that could go on for hours. The one core value I would say is empathy. To me, that is the most important, most all-encompassing value that I have, that it defines everything, all my actions, all my thoughts, all my beliefs. I think we're not going to have time to get to the over-empathizing, because I have a whole wealth of things to say about that, and of how sometimes my empathy overpowers my judgment. But that, I think we'll have no time for that. But correct me if I'm wrong. But that the empathy is something that guides how I see other beings and how I see myself in the world in relation to them, and how I determine what I'm going to do. That's always how I check in with myself. I do feel that I had it naturally as a child. And I feel from an early age, I remember in school, I was always befriending people who were new or didn't have friends, or who were made fun of or beaten up or whatever it is. I was always gravitating to them, and it wasn't even intentional, like, oh, I'm going to be friends with the kids who are, problematic. It was just like my heart went out to them, and I wanted to connect with them and to show them caring. And actually, there's a woman who reached out to me to donate to my Allura Wellness nonprofit when I go out and offer food to the houseless. She said, she was telling me how much she values what I do, because we connected on Facebook. And she said that she had just recently come over from Korea and to America, and she didn't know anyone. And she said that I gave her a birthday present, and she'd never had a birthday present before. And she remembered what it was and how meaningful that was. And I kind of got tearful, because I had no idea of the impact that had on her, and what that little bit of kindness that I didn't even think of. It's like, oh, it's her birthday, I'm going to, of course, give her a present. How meaningful and how big that was to her. And so I think I did have that as a kid. I feel like my parents were very empathic towards other beings. I don't think they were so empathic towards us as their children, but I think they modeled empathy for other beings and animals. And they were not vegan, but they they had the hypocrisy of donating to all these animal causes, but still eating animals. But they were role modeling that we have to take care of each other. And so I think I really learned that from them. And I think feeling wounded so much because I felt like a lot of times they didn't have empathy for me. They had much more empathy for causes and that world out there, but not for me. So I really saw the need to have empathy for everyone, not just your immediate circle, but the whole world, and vice versa. You have empathy for the world, also have empathy for those who are close to you.
Next person, please.
Yeah, I actually cannot find a better core value than empathy. While you were talking, I was like, wait, I need to find something original. I need to... wait, I cannot hear you. You're on mute.
This is not about finding something original.
I know, yeah.
This is what actually fuels your own life.
Exactly.
And always has.
And I'm thinking of what will be the best word to describe. And I think since I became vegan, actually, everything changed in my life because I put everything I do in my life, my job, everything in line with my values. And because what drives me the most is injustice. I hate injustice, and that's what makes me always trying to involve more. And I think empathy is what helped me the most, because that's what put out of my mind all the other goals, such as money or ego or all this. And yeah, I cannot find better word than empathy.
Okay, Paige, please. Thank you, Jonathan.
For me, I immediately thought of compassion, which empathy and compassion are so similar. But I turn to looking it up because I like to just kind of see what, not that it defines me, but I just like that clarity of being able to describe. But it means to suffer together. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. That has really been a driving force for me. In a sense, I don't feel I had a whole lot of suffering growing up, honestly. However, I think that is what drives me, is because I haven't. I've had few key things that have happened, but when I compare myself to others, I think I have such a small percentage of my life that has had any kind of suffering. I've been incredibly blessed, and I feel like I'm driven to help others because of the blessedness that I do feel, not to take it for granted, and to suffer together. I feel like I force myself to watch videos of slaughter. I do. Because for me, I was watching one yesterday, this film. I think you were there too, Vanessa. It was a beautiful film by it was sponsored by Mercy for Animals. It was a person they had a screening with the Save movement. And I had never seen the baby calves that close up that were in transport to a slaughter house, or sheep. And I'm just going to go into it. What happened was they basically got footage of these babies. And I pulled over a slaughter truck last year when I saw these little cow noses sticking outside. I'd only seen pigs' snouts. So I was shocked that it was baby cows. I literally flagged the guy down and got footage. And it's in Jane Velez Mitchell's film called Countdown to Year Zero, which is on Amazon Prime. It's actually my footage. Phenomenal. I was in tears. What shocked me was the footage they got from a drone of the body parts coming off of a truck lift, and seeing, if I may, the head of a sheep. Wow, and the body's being gutted and taking out the meat. I've never seen that close up. And I forced myself to watch. Some people might think, why would you do that? I want to know so I can be as educated at this point in my almost 5-year journey of being vegan. When I went vegan, it was for the environment. And we talk about sustainability. I was known as eco-vegan mama, vegan Rama mama, who went around with her basket, waking people up about the plastic on the planet, thinking that was going to be the end all be all solution to our planetary, to saving the planet, by carrying this basket and encouraging 6 years ago, people to switch out from plastic straws to paper, and plastic bags to paper bags and reusables and so forth. And I think back on that. I watched Conspiracy, and that's what turned me. But actually, what really turned me was sitting next to my 13-year-old daughter who had gone vegan 6 months earlier, and realizing that if I did not make that immediate change now, there was not going to be a sustainable planet for her to live on and have children, for me to have grandchildren. And she may choose not to at some point. You know, she's on her way to be a vegan veterinarian. She may choose not to have children, and that's fine. But I realized it was selfish of me to continue the habits by which I felt I needed to have, or that were, you know, what I grew up with, the traditions. It was selfish. I could not continue on any longer. And I stopped for the environment. And then I had awakening about the animals. So every day when I watch something about the animals suffering, I feel like it gives me, I am already there. There's no turning back, but it gives me an extra validation. I don't know if that's the word, but I can then refer other people to this information as well and say, yeah, this was an incredible film. Watch it. It's 6 minutes long. Wow. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but Vanessa, your turn.
Yeah, for sure. I think Jonathan was on that screening too. Very, very powerful. And I do force myself as well, because I feel like when I have that visceral experience, I can convey it so much more powerfully to those who are not yet aware of what we're doing to the animals. I just wanted to bring up 2 comments, which is that David Wong says his word is integrity, which I think is so critical and so essential. And these are all so very important. George McQuaid says truth. And Donna, thank you so much for watching. Great to see you. Donna says small gestures mean a lot, for sure. You never know that a small kindness, it takes nothing for us to be kind. And a small kindness can have such an effect that we don't even know years later. And she also says witnessing is important. Then we can speak the truth of what we see. Yeah, exactly, Donna. I agree with that. I think that it's so much more authentic when we can know. And I know that people listen to me more when they know I've been to slaughterhouses, that I've actually seen it happen, that I've been part of that process, so that they know I'm not just making stuff up or not speaking authoritatively, that, okay, you've actually been there. I'm going to listen more because I know that you're aware of what you're talking. So yeah, thank you for that. I think that is so true.
So thank you all. We are out of time. I want to thank everyone that was on this panel today, and also, of course, our viewership. And I would invite you all to send us your own topics that you'd like to discuss. Obviously, we did not discuss all the topics today, but I didn't expect that would happen. We have more topics than we have time. And we will continue. What is
She has her eco gear, her sustainable toothbrush.
Yes, and if you're going to get bottled water, get this one because it's made of plant-based. The container, and carry your spork, and use a product made from sustainable. When you're talking about your brushes or your toothbrushes, buy a box of bamboo toothbrushes.
Yes.
And also carry with you, because a lot of things are to go now. You can bring your own. Look at this. Bring your own fork, bring your own knife, bring your own napkins. We don't need to be using plastics. We can bring farmer's market. You can bring all your own bags. They'll pop them right in. Just easy things that are going to help our planet, because we're using a lot more plastics and to-go containers and things like that. And we, as vegans, are already awake. We are already the ones. And we're the conscious.
Sure.
Watch this film. And check out, this incredible film with Dr. Sailesh Rao and Jane Valence Mitchell and many other activists and so forth. And, we get to do our part. and there's a white paper on climate healers. And, let's not forget about Greta Thunberg, who's a vegan. And she brought about a huge awareness with the youth. Yeah. And we had Rachel Parent on last time, and she's an incredible person to follow, sustainable eco person and a vegan as well, a leader in this movement. So thank you so much. This is always a pleasure to contribute and speak about what we're all passionate about.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And just to jump in, Donna says, important conversations for evolving times. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Appreciate your watching. We'd love to have you on as well, Donna. Donna's a great activist and speaker.
So everybody's voices count. Everyone's voices count. So to everyone in the panel, Jonathan, Paige, Vanessa, thank you very much for uplifting us all with your voices today, and for the time and energy that you take to inform, inspire, and hopefully assist your own selves to grow even more. So until next week, same time, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, which is 3 p.m. Pacific Time in North America. Obviously, we would like to have you help us spread this webinar so that we can bring other voices in, and that more people will start using this as a tool instead of mainstream media, to start looking at our own lives and how we can reimagine our lives to be. Like Jonathan was saying before he became vegan and after he became vegan, it's like he sees the world totally different now. So we need to spread the information, and we need to spread the thought-provoking topics. And thank you all for coming here today to watch this. But please also know you can take part in this. This is also your programming. It's not ours. Until next time, this is Dorit saying thank you. And thanks to everyone watching today. All the best. Bye now.